Welcome back, everyone. It's been over a year since the last Dynasty Legends 2 tier list, and with all the new officers introduced, it's definitely time for an update. In this video, we're focusing specifically on chief officers, looking at what makes them powerful, their key traits, and how they stack up in today's battles. If you watched last year's list, you'll remember that I focused on a few main categories, which I've tweaked a bit this time around. And while I'll highlight some top chief and lieutenant officers, I won't be doing a deep dive on each officer's full kit here. If you're interested in specific character guides, let me know in the comments, and I may start rolling out some meta-focused content in the future. And before we jump in, if you're enjoying the work I do, please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps keep this channel alive. As always, feel free to comment with what future videos you'd love to see. Now, when assessing officers, there are a few things I look for. The first is whether they're Apt 20 or Apt 22 because, as you probably know, this can be a pretty big hint if they're going to be overpowered or not. High DPS damage per second is essential, as officers with strong, consistent damage are typically more effective. Ease of use is also important. Some officers have smooth, easy to execute skills, while others can be tricky. Control and immunity CC are also major considerations. Officers with strong crowd control CC abilities can limit enemy actions with stuns, freezes, and silences, creating massive advantages. And then there's CC immunity. If an officer has many ways to be immune to these effects, they have a huge advantage in battles where skills are flying around. Mobility and range are vital, especially for Apt 20 officers who have to close gaps quickly. Slow officers risk taking chip damage from Apt 22 seconds, who typically have great range, tanking abilities, or closing speed. Finally, there's tankiness and health recovery. Some officers can take heavy hits and even heal, making them much more resilient, and this paired with high DPS is a killer combo. Before we get into this, let me just mention lieutenants for a minute. There are probably less than a dozen very strong officers that can be used as lieutenants. And these lieutenants I am listing below with just about any one of these officers. I am not going to go into great detail on specific strategies with each officer, but happy to do so in a separate video. Alright, let's get into it with the Apt 22 officers, starting with Chao. This guy is an Apt 22 powerhouse with top tier ratings across almost every stat. His DPS is outstanding, and he has potent CC that can overwhelm opponents in seconds. His skills at first can be difficult to master as there are specific combos you want to use. However, after a few hours of gameplay, he's not too difficult to use and has incredibly strong skills. All of his skills offer CC immunity, which means he's tough to lock down and he is very easily able to get away. Add in top mobility, and Chao is one of the most overpowered, reliable options for high-tier battles. Next is Luxun. This officer was just released a few weeks ago, and it's hard for me to say if I'd consider Luxun or Chao number 1 right now. Luxun brings a lethal combo of damage, unique playstyle, and versatility. His passive is unique in that he can straight up negate any damage. Of course, this is based off of chance. But in battle, it feels like it occurs quite often. His DPS is sky high, and his CC effects are perfect for keeping enemies locked down. With a strong skill range, Luxun excels in both close and medium range combat, making him one of the best options if you're aiming for consistent, reliable offense. Now on to Liang. Zhuge is another solid Apt 22 with strong DPS and flexibility in a variety of matchups. His CC is powerful. He can create a whirlpool that only Chao can currently get out of, and he can silence and lock enemies down with his ultimate. His skill, range, and mobility make him useful in both offensive and defensive setups. He can withstand plenty of punishment thanks to his skills, providing a lot of damage reduction, and his rock formation where he heals and his CC to all types of control. Next, Lubu. Lubu was the original boss of the game and to this day is still one of the strong officers in the game. Lubu combines solid DPS with tons of crowd control. He does require that you use specific combos to maximum damage, but is fairly easy. He can withstand plenty of punishment thanks to his skills, providing a lot of damage reduction and lifesteal. His raw power and CC make him a great pick for direct, high-impact battles. Then we have Zuo CI. Zuo CI is another strong Apt 22 with respectable DPS and control abilities. His skills are relatively easy to execute, and he has very good resilience. He tanks very well and has one of the highest defense in the game, right behind Dian Wei and awakened Guan Yu in my opinion. What makes him unique is that he should not be bursted down by anyone. Meaning, if for example, Ma Chao tries to take him from 100% HP to 0, he won't be able to because of his passive, which basically reverses all damage as in the previous for Seconds. While not as versatile as the top picks as Lieutenant, Zhuo still holds his ground well, especially for players looking for a blend of tankiness and control. Dian Wei is a dependable Apt 22, albeit a bit lower in raw DPS. His strong CC immunity and tankiness make him a great choice for close-range combat, where he can stay effective even against high CC opponents. He may not be flashy or super strong, but Dian Wei is a good solid option as he can tank a lot of hits. He has a lot of shields and damage reductions, and because of this, he can chip away at enemies. His ultimate also very strong, and if you catch an enemy in it, it will do major damage. Zhou has limited control and mobility, and while his DPS is passable, he struggles to stay effective in high-level play due to his lack of versatility. His cooldowns are high, and his tornado is hard to hit sometimes. And even if he hits the Apt 22 officers, it really does not do too much damage. His passive is strong for tankiness, but Zhou just doesn't have the feel of a strong Apt 22 officer. Now let's talk about the awakened officers, starting with Guan Yu. Guan Yu is an all-around reliable choice, with good CC immunity which all of his skills and is easy to use. The awakened officers aren't easy to get, but they have very strong upgrades to the base version. He doesn't quite hit the DPS levels of Apt 22 officers, but can handle battles well thanks to his tankiness and consistent skill performance. Awakened Sun Shangxiang is a high DPS character with one of the best ranges in the game. Her arrows shoot further than the circle shows granted. This is mostly just the 4th basic attack. The awakened version provides a lot of CC resistance and damage reduction. Her DPS primarily comes from her 2nd skill, which fires arrows from the sky. However, it's her ultimate skill that everyone should be afraid of. Her ultimate can kill just about every officer in the game if they're not careful, and even if they're at full HP. Her skills hit hard, but she can be a bit tricky to master. Awakened Zhou Yan is next. Zhou Yan offers moderate tankiness, but lacks strong DPS and CC against the Apt 22 officers, which leaves him more vulnerable. Most people can get him easily, and he is strong enough to use if you are patient with your skills and look for opportunities. However, he doesn't contend the greatest against Apt 22 officers. Let's talk about the strongest Apt 20 officers. The first being JIA. He is the biggest snake in the game, quite literally. He can cloak himself and get close to the enemy. Then he entraps them and can poison the enemy. Upon 5 stacks of poison, the enemy is blinded and JIA heals himself. This combo is extremely strong as the enemy takes a ton of damage and then damage over time, and it is very hard to react to this. JIA can use his combos in his stealth mode, catching the enemy off guard. He is tied with Liu Meng as the #1 strongest Apt 20 officer. Now let's talk about Liu Meng. What makes him unique is his cooldowns are not too high and you can his skills frequently. His first skill lets him teleport to the enemy. Upon contact with the enemy, they will either get rooted or stunned or silences, all of which are powerful. Then, Liu Meng can place his circle, which is incredibly strong for an Apt 20 officer. Enemies who sit in this circle take damage over time. If the enemy tries to leave the circle, they take massive damage and are blinded for 1 second. Also, when Liu Meng uses the circle, his attacks become range attacks, so he can continuously attack the enemy that's sitting within. Lastly, what makes him so strong is, if you use the circle and the enemy is outside the circle and goes into it, he also takes massive damage and is blinded. Liu Meng is very versatile and strong against Apt 22 officers. Lastly, Chunhua. She is very strong and tanky. Essentially, his first skills provide a large shield which can take any hit head on. When he takes damage, the enemy is stunned and Chunhua rushes to the enemy and knocks them down. From there, I like using the paintbrush guy to silence the enemy so they can't flash out, and then use Chunhua's 2nd skill to knock them down again. I use Chunhua is an Apt 20 only series, and she works very well if you are patient. She is probably the 2nd or 3rd strongest Apt 20 officers currently. I highly recommend her. Moving on to lower impact Apt, 20 officers like Huang Yuing, Cao, and Diokan. These officers don't bring much to the table in terms of DPS, control, or survivability. Again, we have to compare these officers against the meta officers, which are always going to be tanky and high DPS. Issues with these Apt 20 officers range from low mobility, low damage, and inability to tank any damage from meta officers. And there you have it. Let me know in the comments if you agree with these rankings or if you have different thoughts on any of these officers. And again, please remember to like, subscribe, and share if you found this video helpful. It really keeps the channel going. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.